There is a gentleman that I found on X over the weekend, just brilliant, and it's worth reading in its entirety. I'm not going to read it all to you. John Spencer is his name. He's a self-identified war scholar, chair of war studies at Madison Policy Forum, and he writes at Substack a piece a couple of days ago, headlined in day 7 of the UN, and I know we're in day 11, 10 or 11, but he said, he wrote this just a few days ago, the U.S.-Israeli war, the strategy appears to be working and Iran is losing. In classical strategic terms, he writes, war must always be evaluated through the relationship between political objectives and military action. The success of a war cannot be measured simply by explosions, missile launches, or headlines. It must be measured by whether the use of force achieves the political objectives of war, whether through territorial control, destruction of military capability, or compelling the enemy to change its behavior in accordance with those objectives. Thus far, the United States has been consistent in publicly stating its goals. President Trump's statement announcing the start of operations made clear that the war is aimed at ending the Iranian regime's nuclear weapons pursuit, destroying the missile capabilities Tehran has long used as a shield for that nuclear ambition, and limiting Iran's ability to threaten global commerce through the Strait of Hormuz. This is not declared regime change. That distinction matters, he writes. Strategic objectives must be judged based on what political leaders state as their aims, not what critics speculate those aims might secretly become. The stated goal of this war is not to overthrow the Islamic Republic of Iran. The stated goal is to compel the regime to fundamentally change its behavior, abandon its nuclear weapons ambitions, degrade its ballistic missile capabilities, stop threatening the closure of the Strait of Hormuz, and cease its decades-long use of proxy terrorism across the Middle East. If the regime ultimately collapses under the pressure of military defeat or internal revolt, that would certainly be a positive outcome of the war, but it has not, at least publicly, been declared as a strategic objective. And that distinction is not just academic. He says, I understand the skepticism surrounding wars in the Middle East. I participated in the 2003 invasion of Iraq, which was explicitly framed as regime change war. The stated objective, the removal of Saddam Hussein and his Ba'ath Party from power, along with the elimination of Iraq's weapons of mass destruction. Like many soldiers preparing for that operation, my unit was told by our 2-star commander that the campaign would likely be a 60-day operation. But to be very clear and frank, Iran is not Iraq. The Saddam regime was removed from power quickly, but the United States then disbanded the Iraqi army and large parts of the Ba'ath government structure. What followed was a prolonged effort to impose a new political system and conduct nation building while fighting a growing insurgency. History unfolded very differently than originally planned. But strategic analysis must evaluate the war that exists, not the war people fear might emerge. Until the United States alters its stated political objectives, the strategy must be measured against the goals that have been articulated. So just days into the war, the evidence increasingly suggests that Iran will be compelled to do our will. The United States and Israel are imposing their will on the Islamic Republic in Iran. And he goes on to understand why this matters. You have to understand Iran's strategy, and that's to cause chaos and destabilization and whatnot. Skipping ahead here a bit, Mr. Spencer writes, leadership decapitation is not by itself a guaranteed method of changing regime behavior. History shows that regimes can sometimes absorb the loss of senior leaders and continue their policies. But the simultaneous elimination of multiple senior leaders in a short period of time disrupts decision-making, weakens internal confidence, forces remaining officials to focus on survival as much as strategy. The continued threat that newly appointed successors could also be targeted only compounds that instability. Iran's military capabilities are also being steadily degraded. He talks about how we've crushed their naval forces and their missile launch capability. Degrading that arsenal, therefore, has implications far beyond the current conflict, Mr. Spencer writes. The campaign includes a component that is less visible but equally important, and that's strategic messaging. President Trump and the administration appear to have deliberately introduced elements of unpredictability and uncertainty into this conflict. War is the realm of uncertainty. Uncertainty is not merely a condition of war, it can also be a weapon. Reading here from John Spencer, a war scholar over at Substack. I'm going to continue this read because it's worth your time. Hang on just a second. Asking the X poll question today as well. If you're on X, follow at Chris Stigall. I'm just simply asking, okay, we bomb Iran into the Stone Age, but their theocracy remains intact when it's all said and done. And this Ayatollah's son takes over, and he's the exact same crazy and Islamo-fascist that his dad was. Are we better off for it? Do you mind that? Is that okay? So far, and I mean, it's early in the it's unscientific, but so far, overwhelmingly, respondents say, no, I'm not okay with that. Which would then imply what, Fast Eddie? Regime change. And we're a no regime change war era, Ed, so I don't understand. That was where I thought we were going. We're no regime change war, right? I was certainly saying the same thing. Boy, Iraq, Afghanistan, that was stupid. We will never do that again. And so Trump says, that's okay. We're not going in there to change the regime. We're just bombing them into the Stone Age so they don't have weapons to threaten us. And we hope they'll change regimes, but if they don't, then so be it. But most of the people responding say they want the regime changed.
Okay.
What do you do with that?
I don't know. I mean, even Trump himself has said that last week. He's like, we're not doing the regime change. We're just, hopefully the people rise up and they take what's that. Like, I mean, if we're going Lindsey Graham, if we're doing it, then let's see. Well, no. Well, yeah, I don't know, man.
Then there's him, Lindsey Graham. We'll get to that guy in a minute. Sorry, I came across it over the weekend. It's John Spencer. Iran's missile arsenal has long been one of its primary instruments of coercion. Iran possesses large ballistic missiles, its systems capable of striking targets across the entire region. And Tehran has openly discussed expanding that missile force dramatically as the foundation of a broader strategy. Degrading that arsenal has implications far beyond the current conflict, he writes. Trump and the administration appear to have deliberately introduced elements of unpredictability. By keeping the scope and duration of operations unclear, the United States forces Iranian leaders to consider a wide range of possible escalatory outcomes. Will this campaign last days? Will it last weeks? Will ground forces be introduced? Could Kurdish fighters become involved? Could unrest internally intensify? May internal dissent escalate into a broader uprising? None of these possibilities have to occur, he writes, in order to create strategic pressure. The mere plausibility forces Iran decision makers to confront multiple simultaneous dilemmas. And he writes, this is working, and there's evidence of this working. More on this with my friend John Hayward in just a moment. Just to conclude this piece, because I typically don't like reading lengthy pieces to you. I know reading to people is generally kind of tired. I don't like doing that, but I think this piece is important. It is a piece on Substack by a gentleman with the last name of Spencer. His name is John Spencer. He's the executive director of the Urban Warfare Institute. He's a war scholar, an Iraq vet himself, and chair of war studies at Madison Policy Forum. And he wrote, Israel war, the strategy appears to be working, the U.S.-Israel war appears to be working, and Iran is losing. So concluding here what he wrote, and then I want to bring in our buddy John Hayward, who's also brilliant, to see if he concurs with the summary here. 7 days into this conflict, he writes, and the military balance clearly favors the United States and Israel. Iran's attacks against Israel and other regional states have been significantly reduced. Its missile and drone forces are being systemically degraded, its naval capabilities destroyed, its leadership structure continues to have pressure. The Islamic regime in Iran is no longer shaping this war, it's reacting to it. And just as importantly, the United States, our forces, and our interests are already safer today than they were 7 days ago. The regime's ability to secretly pursue a nuclear weapon, threaten American troops, or immediate neighboring states and hold global commerce hostage through missile and naval coercion is being steadily degraded. None of this, he writes, guarantees the final outcome of the war. No one can say with certainty whether the Iranian regime will abandon its pursuit of nukes, agree to intrusive internal inspections, or surrender its stockpile of enriched uranium, or dismantle its ballistic missile program, or stop using the Strait of Hormuz as a coercive threat, or end its decades-long investment in proxy militias. And yes, President Trump and his demand for unconditional surrender is consistent with policy objectives stated from the beginning of this war. It does not necessarily mean the surrender of the Iranian state. It means the unconditional end of the behaviors that caused the conflict. The regime must abandon its pursuits. But what can only be evaluated right now, he writes, is the strategy. And here's how he concludes, and this is the most important. He says, the use of force appears to be systemically reducing the regime's capabilities across multiple domains. The measure of strategy is not noise, destruction, or headlines. It's whether force is bending the enemy toward your political objective. And days into this war, evidence suggests that's exactly what's happening. He says, one example is the Iranian president publicly apologizing for attacks on neighboring countries, an early signal that the regime may already be recalibrating its behavior. Statements must ultimately be judged by actions. But a final caution is necessary. Now listen up to this. This is again from John Spencer, executive director of the Urban Warfare Institute. He says this: the information age. Analysis is everywhere, but not all analysis is equal. Just as a reader should examine the biography of an author before purchasing a serious book, it is wise to examine the background of anyone claiming expertise on this war. Review their professional and academic history. Examine their previous commentary on military operations. Look at their social media posts and past analysis. If someone has a long history of purely political commentary, whether anti-Trump, anti-American, anti-Israel, or driven by ideological positions, it becomes difficult for that individual to separate political preference from objective strategic analysis. War demands clear thinking. The coming days will reveal whether Iran chooses escalation, endurance, or negotiation. For now, the strategic duel continues. That's a guy named John Spencer. His piece is at Substack. U.S.-Israel war, the strategy appears to be working, and Iran is losing. So we bring in John Hayward, one of our most trusted voices, the national security deputy editor at Breitbart, has been for years. We've leaned on him for many conflict and in terms of his analysis over the years with, I think, great accuracy. And so, John, I'd just ask you, the question that I've been asking this audience this morning on X, and he talked about it a little in this piece, Mr. Spencer did, is we could be talking about an Iran that, in fact, does not change their theocratic leadership. Maybe they're decimated in terms of their abilities to do anything, but maybe their leadership doesn't change at all, and are we okay with that? And so far, unscientifically on X, most of my audience says they are not okay with that. What do you say? Good morning.
Well, good morning. I can understand why the audience wouldn't feel that way. We look at how malign Iran has been ever since the Islamic Revolution. How many uprisings have they had now where they've had to kill thousands of their own people to stay in power? And we think, well, gee, after we bomb the hell out of them like this, shouldn't that collapse the regime? Is anything less than that really a win? If the Ayatollahs are still there, the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps is still there, and they can just reconstitute their abilities and become a global threat again. So I'm sure a lot of people see the collapse of the regime as the final victory, and anything less than that is going to feel like less of a slam dunk, even if all the other objectives you were just mentioning are completed. Even if we can decisively get rid of their nuclear program, if the theocracy is still there, a bad actor remains on the map after we went to all-out war against them.
Even though we're in this precarious spot, we're many Trump voter, and I would be one. President Trump said we've been in a lot of stupid wars, and I'm not going to get us into a stupid war. And so now you have a healthy contingent on social media. How measurable it is, the polling doesn't suggest it's as measurable as it is loud on social media, say, this is a regime change war. He promised no regime change wars. And you say what to that?
Well, I know people are nervous about regime change wars because look at the last ones. Look at how that's been working out every time we've tried it. And you can't even begin to think about a regime change war until you have boots on the ground. The only way to forcibly replace the leadership of a country is to completely conquer it and do what we did to Germany and Japan in World War II. That has not gone well in the modern age, and everybody's allergic to nation building. Me too. So I don't think we want that. So we have to understand that it is possible that this kind of airstrike campaign could get us to many other objectives. We could reduce Iran as a threat. I think we've done that. They don't have a navy anymore. We're wiping out a lot of their top shelf missiles. They're no longer the regional threat they were 10 days ago. So that part is going well. But if the objective is regime change or bust, I don't think a lot of people want to see the kind of force deployed that would require. And we look at what happened in Iraq and Afghanistan, and I don't blame anybody for being nervous about getting involved in something else like that.
So it's kind of a catch-22. And I'll be honest, I'm one of these. I feel exactly as you feel, as you just said. Nobody's excited about boots on the ground or trying to build a new nation. But we're left feeling kind of gross about all this if that same theocracy is still in charge, even if degraded, when it's over. So what do you do?
Well, one thing you do is what we're doing right now, which is degrade their ability to influence the rest of the Middle East. Iran is the Shiite Islam superpower. And in the Middle East, that gives them a special status because all Shiite Muslims feel some sense of deference or at least respect for the Iranian regime. And that gives them a little bit extra staying power that you wouldn't see out of a Gaddafi in Libya or a Saddam Hussein in Iraq. That's something you have to be realistic about when you're doing battle with a regime like this. But at the same time, that means if they get absolutely pulverized like we're doing now, and we walk away with a tiny handful of casualties and we've completely defanged them, that's a humiliation that this theocracy would not easily get over, even if they remain in power. They'll try to say it's a win if the theocracy still exists at all. But for a lot of people in the Middle East, they respect strength, they respect success. And if Iran looks like it's been humiliated, it's going to reduce the threat they pose for some time to come.
John Hayward, is it realistic to say that the neighbors, Bahrain, Qatar, UAE, Saudi Arabia, who've kind of been loath to get involved with Iran, obviously Iran took some shots at them. Iran has now said, "So sorry about that. We kind of lost ourselves. Sorry for shooting at you." But suddenly those neighbors are feeling a little more emboldened to maybe join the fray here a little bit with the U.S. and Israel. Is that what we're seeing? And does that change the dynamic of relations there?
I don't know if they'll join the fray. They're supportive at this point of the operation, and they're highly critical of Iran. But every one of those countries is a Sunni Arab monarchy with a large, restless Shiite minority population. And every one of them is nervous that the Shiites are going to go bananas and start rioting and so forth in their country. And that would be an additional threat they'd have to face. Some of them could conceivably be overthrown by a determined Shiite uprising if that were to happen. So they're going to step very carefully when it comes to actually joining in the fight against Iran. They might even help with some air power here and there, but if they really go to war against Iran, they're potentially opening a battle in the Middle East that they really don't want to be a part of.
Just to be clear, so you're saying that those neighboring countries to Iran, they have minorities that are supportive of Iran, and if they joined us in a full-scale attack, those minorities may start giving them trouble? They're moderate governments, is that about right?
Absolutely. Most of those countries, the Shiite minorities in those countries, have had uprisings and riots within the last 10 to 20 years. So that's not a theoretical problem. It's something that could very much happen. I think one of the big reasons Iran attacked them is because they want that to happen. They're trying to provoke that kind of an uprising, or at least set the stage for the Shiite minorities in those countries to get loud, get noisy, and begin bolstering Iran's case.
You've been good enough to hang with us, and I want to hold you for another segment if I could, because China is a big story here, too, and you've written about that, John Hayward, at Breitbart today. I'll ask you before the break, though, oil prices. The Trump administration has been out this weekend saying, hey, don't sweat it. It's not a matter of supply. It's just getting the Strait of Hormuz back open, and we're going to soon. Are you freaked out about oil prices? Does President Trump lose political cachet here and patience at home if he can't deal with energy prices soon?
Only if they go a lot higher than they are for a lot longer. A minor temporary spike is not a big problem for him politically. Nobody likes it. Nobody wants to see the price of the pump go up. But I think this would have to go on for quite some time. It would have to go on for months, and oil would have to get a lot more expensive than it is. And the rest of the Western world would really have to feel it before it was a political problem for Trump.
Back with John Hayward. He is the National Security Deputy Editor at Breitbart. He's written about China specifically and what this has done to them. I'll ask him about Russia, too. The Wall Street Journal sort of posits that this actually has Russia in a vice long term, particularly with the moves we've made on Venezuela. It's a big picture. More in a minute. John, just quickly to put a bow on this kind of regime change business. You wrote a piece that said that some of these security forces are failing to show up for duty, perhaps. Could this take care of itself? I mean, is it a pipe dream to imagine that morale would just cause decay and erosion naturally of leadership, and the people of Iran really could rise up and install someone moderate? Is that a pipe dream or possible?
Well, no, that's how war works. War is always a contest of will, and war is always won when the enemy's will to fight breaks, and they look for a resolution. And sometimes that's cataclysmic, and you see an uprising, a disintegration of morale inside the enemy army. Now, every war has rumors that people are surrendering. Sometimes it's true, sometimes it's not, sometimes it's exaggerated, but there is word coming out of Iran that there have been some problems with some of the non-IRGC units. The IRGC is their elite military. They swore allegiance to the new Ayatollah yesterday and vowed to continue the fight, which is what they're going to say, of course. What else would they say? But if the IRGC starts breaking down and we start seeing real morale problems, significant morale issues in the IRGC, then the end would be nigh for Iran. They put a lot of eggs in that basket, and they expect that group, the Revolutionary Guards, to fight to the bitter end. And if there's any sign that they're not willing to keep fighting anymore, then we might be looking at a surrender.
Paint the global picture for me. We've toppled the Maduro regime in Venezuela. We effectively have control of it there. Soon, in theory, we will be able to control the flow of oil through the Strait of Hormuz again. Russia is still a situation, obviously, with Ukraine. And then there's China. Put all these puzzle pieces together for us, John.
Well, a lot of this is really bad for China. China is losing a lot of its energy infrastructure. They're super reliant on oil out of the Middle East. About half of their oil and natural gas is currently at risk in the Iran war. They don't want to lose the discounted oil they've been getting from Iran. They would probably survive losing the discounts, but if they lose access to the oil, that's a severe problem for China's economy. They're well aware of it. Now, they just put out a new 5-year plan and an estimate in their big political meeting for the year where they only mildly scaled back GDP, and they didn't mention Iran at all. And that struck a lot of observers as whistling past the graveyard. They don't want to admit how bad this is for them. Losing Venezuela was bad for them. Everything is coming up against China right now, and President Trump's push to get them out of the Southern Hemisphere. Big problem for China. They've spent billions of dollars developing influence in the Southern Hemisphere under the United States. And if Latin America turns decisively against China and unites behind the United States, there goes billions of dollars and years of effort on the part of the Chinese, and it's going to make them recalculate their strategy. So is the failure of their military equipment. It's now become almost a joke how badly China's military equipment has performed in Iran's hands. And some of that's that the Iranians maybe aren't as good at using it as Chinese soldiers would be. But I guarantee you there's a lot of military planners at the People's Liberation Army right now that are not liking what they're seeing coming out of this conflict. They didn't expect us to have unchallenged air superiority in 2 to 3 days.
Is this just a kind of a happy side outcome of striking Iran, that we would weaken Russia and China, that eventually oil prices would drop to degrade Russia's economy as well as China's at the same time? Sort of a happy accident?
I don't think it's an accident. I think the planners that set this up, it's a strategy. They knew this was going to happen. How could they not? They knew that this would have an impact on China. And China's very muted response. They denounced the war. They called for an end to hostilities. They did some yelling about the United States picking on Iran and so on. But they haven't done anything meaningful ever since the war started. And that tells you the planners that knew how much this was going to harm and rattle China were exactly right. I think this is all a big part of the strategy.
And just briefly, the UK, Trump tells the UK, we don't want your stupid little battleships. Stay out of it. You're too late to the party. We don't need your help. What about Europe broadly and the way they behaved during this?
Everything Europe has done has vindicated Trump's opinion of them. I mean, he's been proven right in every respect about their military capabilities, their political allegiances, how much they've fallen under sway to China, how much some of these countries are now nervous about their Muslim populations. They've been effectively colonized, and that reduces their ability to get involved in a war like this. They're clearly worried about their domestic populations blowing up. Every single thing that Europe has done since the beginning of Operation Epic Fury has completely vindicated Trump's opinion of them.
If you want to be smarter throughout this conflict, John Hayward is who you must read, the National Security Deputy Editor at Breitbart. John, thank you, my friend.
For full shows, live and on demand, it's Salem News Channel.